Original.
Hello and welcome to Webcrawlers, the podcast where we do a deep dive into some of our favorite mysteries. Each week we will introduce our topic, lay out our research and findings, reveal some conspiracy theories, and conclude with our own hypothesis. I'm Allie Siegel, and I'm so excited because I just found out what this guest's job was, and I have a million questions. We have special guest Jacque Nodell. Hi, Jacque.
Hi, Allie.
Did I pronounce Did I pronounce your last name right too?
You sure did. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm notorious for pronouncing everything wrong.
No, you're great. You did great.
Okay, good. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your very cool job that you just informed me of.
Okay. So I'm Jacque, like Allie said, and I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I am a comic book historian.
Which is insane. I didn't even know. How did you come across, how does one become a comic book historian?
Well, it's been a lifelong journey in that. So my grandfather was actually a comic book artist.
Oh my God.
And he created the Green Lantern.
Holy
the
shit.
Golden Age Green
That's
Lantern.
crazy.
Yeah. So I grew up going to comic book conventions. I can safely say that I'm probably one of the few people that went to a comic book convention while they were in the womb.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so I just grew up with it, and I kind of strayed from it. And then as I became an adult, I really got back into it. And in 2009, I started a blog called Sequential Crush. And that was all about the history of 1960s and 1970s romance comic books.
So what are romance comic books? Are there any that are famous, or is that kind of like an underground niche?
They were actually at one time, like in the late 40s and in the 50s, more popular than superhero books.
Oh my God.
I mean, boys read them too, but they were made mostly for girls and young women. And after this is a whole separate show about the.
I was literally about to be like, we need to have you on for a comic book episode because this is so interesting.
Yeah, there was a thing called the Comics Code in the 50s, and they decreased in popularity after that, and superheroes came back. But today, I think that if you aren't familiar with romance comics, most people know sort of the imagery of that Roy Lichtenstein.
Yes.
Like he basically stole those from comic books, and the ones of the girls, crying, those are from romance comic books.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So they were, dating stories and stuff like that.
I love that. So do you have a favorite comic book or favorite few comic books?
Well, the past couple of years, I had been collecting tons of romance comic books. And for me, comic books are kind of the weirder, the better.
Yeah.
So right now that I've built my romance collection, I'm kind of looking for all sorts of oddball comics. Like I have a Smokey the Bear comic book. I just bought one about Supergirl and seatbelt safety that was put out by the Department of Transportation.
Oh my God.
So really my favorites are just whatever is weird and sort of offbeat.
This is inspiring me. I want to do now a Webcrawlers comic of me and Melissa solving crimes.
I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah, this is my new passion in life. Well, now that I've asked you a million questions about your job, please continue. I'm sorry I've derailed you.
Oh, no, you're fine. Okay. So not only am I a huge comic book fan, I also love crime. And because I'm in my 30s and
that's what we do. That's what women in our 30s do.
It's just what women do. So I don't think my husband will ever understand it, but so I listen to tons of podcasts and, I just got my Discovery Plus
hell yeah
subscription, all that good stuff. And so I was wondering, were there any comic book, like real life stories of comic book crimes that had happened around comic books? And so I had heard of some, I knew of some, and then I, did some research and I actually came up with a huge list. So there's way too much for one episode, but
okay, but this is a podcast that you should start.
Well, so actually I did just start a podcast.
Okay, great. What is it?
It's called Sequential Crush. It's the same as my blog. And it's about comic book history in general. So I will have some of those crime episodes up on there at some point.
Because I want to be like, don't give us all the good stuff. Like,
no. So I have 3 stories for you today.
Amazing.
Because I knew the Web Crawlers audience would love to hear about some pop culture and crime.
Yeah, they love this shit.
Yeah. So one of these stories has a famous actor. Another ended in a murder. There was a third where the good guys weren't all they were cracked up to be. So there's kind of
my seat.
The twist at the end.
Oh, shit.
Okay. So just one little note about comic book collecting before we get started.
Okay.
So comic books really only have value like when they're sold, like any collectible. Because technically it's just paper, right? It's just ephemera that if no one wants it, it's not worth anything. So they're only technically worth what someone is willing to purchase at an auction. Yeah. So keep that in mind while we listen to these stories.
Okay, great.
Okay. So the first one, Allie, I'm sure, do you know who Nicolas Coppola is?
I do, but our listeners might not. So why don't you tell us who Nicolas Coppola is?
So Nicolas Coppola is Nicolas or Nick Cage.
Crazy. Yeah. He's part of that family.
He is. He is. He is. And he is really into comic books. You may remember he played Ghost Rider. And you probably heard that he was slated to play Superman in this abandoned Tim Burton Superman Lives movie.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
There's actually a documentary that someone made through a Kickstarter about the whole thing. I haven't watched it yet, but it's on my list.
Oh my God.
One of his kids is named Kal-El, which is Superman's birth name.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And even Cage comes from the comic book character Luke Cage.
Oh, wow. I did not know that's how he got his... Wow.
Yes.
He is a real comic book head. He really is in it.
Super into comic books.
Oh my God.
And so this is probably one of the most well-known cases of comic book crime. So because he was such a huge fan, he had amassed a large comic book collection, including a copy of one of the most important comics ever published. Do you want to take a guess?
Oh, God. The first edition is Superman? Batman? Superman?
Superman.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Okay. So that comic was called Action Comics, and it was #1, and it was published in 1938.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So it's an old comic book. And not only was it a rare comic book, he had an incredibly pristine copy. It was graded at a near mint. So it was just in such good condition and so valuable. So in January of 2000, Nicolas Cage reported that comic book, along with a few others, including the first appearance of Batman, had just vanished from his house.
Shit.
They had been like mounted in frames and they were gone.
Oh, God.
So he wasn't sure when exactly they had been stolen because there had been people at his home in Los Angeles. You know, I'm sure he's got like staff and probably had parties.
I was going to say, I feel like he's like a partier. Like, I feel like he's got some people in and out.
So he was like totally shocked. I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm shocked pretty much every day when my iPhone goes missing.
Yes.
And I find it in the couch. So
yeah, like when I can't find my remote or my keys. Like I can't imagine just coming home and being like, oh, these hugely expensive things that I love are now all of a sudden gone.
Exactly. So imagine this comic book. Okay, so the Los Angeles Police Department art theft detail department, they were put on the case and they were given a number of tips, including bad tips.
Yeah. And
one in 2002, it led them to a safety deposit box here in Tennessee.
I was going to say, was it your house? the FBI raided my home.
Yes. I was in high school, but yeah. And it turned out to be like a replica of the Action Comics #1 cover, and it was wrapped around a lingerie catalog. I don't know.
Weirdo.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know whose that was, but
yeah.
Then in 2011, the comic randomly popped up in a abandoned storage locker in the San Fernando Valley in California. And one of the guys from Storage Wars, that show, actually like reunited him with the comic because I think he had bought the contents of this.
That's so funny. I was about to be like, did it end up on Storage Wars? And then like it literally did. Like that's so funny.
So sadly, Nick Cage ended up selling the copy of Action Comics #1 shortly after he got it back. I think he had some money that he had. Yeah. So you said you know a lot about Nick Cage, so you probably know more about that.
Yeah, we did
me.
an episode on him. He accrued some debt.
Yeah. So at auction, the comic book went for over $2 million, which at the time, it was the most expensive comic book ever sold.
Oh my God.
So I'm guessing, you know, not only because it was Superman, but it had belonged to Nick Cage.
Yeah.
It had gone missing for over 10 years. So the provenance of the comic book, you know, is really interesting. So there were other comics that did go missing from his collection, and they are still missing.
How
including
weird.
The Detective Comics #27 with the first appearance of Batman. So we still don't know who stole the comics and why. I don't know. I'm guessing maybe they're still looking, or like it's a cold case. But the perp is still out there.
You know what's so weird about stealing something that's so specific is like, if you try to resell it, isn't it immediately tracked back to the original owner? Like, it just seems like a bad idea.
You would think whoever stole it would think about that. It's not like they're just stealing something that's, you know, every day and run of the mill.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that in 2012, it was reported that the guys behind one of my favorite shows, Reno 911.
I love Reno 911 so much. Oh my God.
They were working on a movie version of this whole heist, and it was going to be called Action #1.
Oh my God.
But I wasn't able to find any updates, and I guess it was probably like abandoned.
That's brilliant, though. That would be so funny. And also, I can imagine Nick Cage being willing to be in it as well.
Yeah. And then actually just this past April, Nick Cage did a little spoof video promoting his last movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Yes.
And in the little spoof video, he pleads for his comic books back. And they put like a fake hotline number. They
so
should have put a
funny.
real number.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But I guess it does go to show that Nick Cage has a pretty good sense of humor.
Oh, I think so too.
Thing.
And that movie was, I mean, it was stupid, but it really showed like he does have a sense of humor about himself. Like I really enjoy him, obviously.
Yes. So that is the Nicolas Cage Action Comics.
That's insane. I mean, I'm a Nick Cage head and I had no idea that had happened to him. Nor did I know that comic books could sell for $2 million.
Yes. And now they're selling for more. Some of them. I know an Amazing Fantasy number 15, first appearance of Spider-Man just sold for it was like $3.5 million.
Oh my God.
So yeah, if you have any of those comics, you're sitting pretty.
Jesus.
So the next story, it's sad because it did end with a murder.
Okay.
So very sad, but there are some interesting points. Okay. So there was a 78-year-old man named Homer Marciniak in a small town in upstate New York.
Okay.
The town is called Medina. And he was a retired janitor, and he had this comic book collection. And it was mostly superhero comics and lots of war comics.
Wow.
Now, unlike Nicolas Cage's collection, this guy had a lot of less valuable issues, but he had a
ton of them,
a very large collection, and it was worth anywhere. It was estimated because he did leave a list about $30,000 to $100,000. The whole collection.
Wow.
So the other main player in this terrible story is a guy named Rico Vendetti. And he just sounds like a villain.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like an evil character from a comic book.
Yeah. So Vendetti was the owner of a few small businesses in, I believe, in Rochester, also in upstate New York, including he had a pizza place and a bar and a pawn shop. And he was living upstairs from one of his businesses. And it turned out he was running another enterprise. But this one, it wasn't food or drink. It was a criminal.
Yeah, he sounds like a mob boss or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Something like that.
So what Vendetti had was a gang of people that would boost items from various stores, and then they would sell the stolen items on eBay and on Craigslist. I found that he was selling everything from stolen breast pumps.
Oh my God. What?
To binoculars and pet medications, pet DNA tests, and razors. And apparently Crest white strips were one of his best sellers. And he even sold stolen cross stitch kits from Joann Fabrics.
I feel like a lot of this is stealing people's CVS bags and Amazon packages. And this is so weird.
Yeah. I guess, he had this gang of boosters who were, an organized shoplifting ring. People.
This is crazy.
So somehow this Rico guy found out about the retired janitor's comic book collection. Oh. He decided he wanted it. So he first sent someone to Marciniak's house to try to buy the collection from him. But the guy didn't want to sell. Vendetti decided that he would get the collection the way he got the rest of his merchandise. He would just steal it.
Oh, this poor guy.
But he decided he wouldn't do it himself because that wasn't his style.
He's a coward.
He organized a team of people to steal the comic book collection. So he hired this woman named Arlene Combs, who had worked at his pizza restaurant. I think his pizza place was called Papa Van's.
Why does that sound familiar, kind of?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a few. Wait, Papa Van's
Yeah.
Pizza.
I think it was just like a what because of his last name, Vendetti.
Oh, here it is. Papa Van's Eatery, Rochester.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know
Oh,
if
it's
it's still.
closed.
Yeah, that was his. That was
Yeah.
his.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So Arlene, she said that she would go organize a group of people to complete the theft.
Aw.
And he was going to give her $2,500 to get the comic book collection to him. So she assembled a group of people to break into this poor guy's house.
Oh.
And there were actually 2 attempts at stealing the collection. But the first time she couldn't find the guy's house.
Oh my God.
So the second time she was given a pre-programmed GPS. I'm surprised they didn't just print her out like MapQuest.
Yeah, MapQuest. Yeah, that's what my mom does.
Yeah. So then on July 4th, 2010, Arlene and this crew that she had assembled of 3 guys went to Marciniak's house and cut the phone lines.
Oh my God.
And then they came back the next day, like in the very early morning hours, and they broke into the house through a window on the first floor.
Jesus.
The elderly man woke up from the noise and he confronted the burglars.
Oh.
And one of the guys hit him in the face violently, and there was blood, and he was tied up with sheets, and they threatened him with a gun. It turned out that it was a BB gun, but still extremely traumatizing, right?
Of course.
So the burglars stole coins, another valuables, and they got the comic book collection.
Oh, God.
And they had a getaway driver, and this woman drove the getaway car, and off they went.
Oh.
So Marciniak was thankfully able to get himself free from being tied up. He ran to a neighbor's house, and he was in his underwear and an undershirt, and he was bleeding.
Oh.
They took him to the local hospital, and his facial injuries were treated. Well, unfortunately, he went home, and it was like less than 10 hours later, he had a heart attack and died.
No, my God.
Yeah. So sad. And his death was attributed to the physical assaults, the emotional trauma, everything.
Oh.
And it was also said that he was heartbroken over the theft of his beloved comic book collection, which, I mean, as a collector myself, I totally get, they are material things, but you get attached, right?
I wonder if, like, in terms of in court, if someone dies of a heart attack, that can still be like manslaughter or not. Probably not. I don't know.
Well, we'll get
we'll
there.
See. Okay.
Okay. So after that evening on July 5th, Arlene Combs and another guy took the comic book collection to the Rico Vendetti, the mastermind behind this whole thing. But when Vendetti found out, I guess he heard on the news that Marciniak had died as a result of the home invasion, he decided he would have to destroy the collection.
It's all for nothing.
Yeah. Vendetti and his crew, they weren't picked up. No one knew. And the case went cold.
Oh.
A few minutes later, a few months later, a woman was picked up in Rochester on prostitution charges.
Uh-oh, was it Arlene?
And hoping she could evade charges, she let the cops know that she had some information on a home invasion in Medina. Well, it turns out that it was the very home invasion we've been speaking about. And the woman who was a sex worker, it was not Arlene, it was a different woman.
Oh.
She had been the getaway driver.
Oh my God.
Yeah. She was able to lead the cops to Vendetti and his crew. And he was ultimately charged with racketeering for not only the burglary, but the whole shoplifting empire that he had. So all those cold medications and breast pumps.
Yeah. The razors, the dog pills.
Yes. Those were, he was charged with that. He was sentenced to 20 years.
Okay.
And so was Arlene Combs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One of the other guys, the guy who actually hit him in the face, was charged with murder.
Good.
And he was sentenced to 20 years. So I don't know their status, but hopefully they do serve, a lot of that.
Yeah.
Or all of it. Besides the fact that this innocent man lost his life, the collection that Homer Marciniak had, they weren't purchased in his adulthood. They weren't like, Nick Cage buying comics because he's rich and famous. These were the comic books that he had collected as a child.
This makes me want to cry. That's so sad.
So sad. And he was just a retired janitor. God. These comic books not only had immense sentimental value to him, he had planned to pass them on to his family, like his nephews and niece and nephews. So just very tragic. The comic books were never recovered. So it is very likely that they were destroyed or thrown away by Vendetti. But Marciniak did have a list. So I am hoping that maybe someday some of them will turn up and can be given to his family. We'll see. Actually, I'm sure you watch American Greed.
Yeah, I've seen a few episodes of that show. Yeah.
They cover this story in a lot more detail in season 11.
Oh, cool. They did a good episode on the maple syrup heist, I think. American Greed. Yeah.
they did a great job, and they actually drew the story in a comic book, in panels and things.
Oh, how cool. Oh, that's awesome.
But really just a sad story and such a shame because of all the greed and self-interest and
how horrible. And this poor guy. Oh,
I know. So that one was a little heavy on the murder. And
that one's a little murder heavy.
That was a little murder heavy. So we are going to wrap this up with one more story of comic books and crime.
Ooh, yes.
Okay. This story is wild and there's so many components to it. And I'm going to try to explain it as succinctly as possible. And I'm probably going to butcher some of the names.
That's what we do here.
Yeah. So hopefully no one, calls in and gets angry.
That's okay. That's the web crawler's way.
Yeah. Okay. So the story starts with an attorney named Anthony Chiofalo. From 2010 to 2012, he worked as corporate counsel in Houston, Texas, for an American branch of a Japanese crane company called Tadano. Not long after he started working for them, the amount of money the company was spending on billable hours and legal fees just totally skyrocketed. And they were like, where's all this going? It's more than,
what's going on?
Yeah. So they ended up doing an investigation in 2012. And as it turns out, Chiofalo was, let's just call him Anthony. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah. Anthony.
He was embezzling money from the company. And in total, he stole $9 million in just 2 years of employment.
Okay. Way to not be sly about it.
Exactly. He wasn't doing it pennies at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what does he decide to do with all this money? What do you think, Allie? He decided to buy.
He must have bought comic books, I'm assuming.
Yes.
That's insane.
So he bought a bunch of collectibles, comic books included. And not only did he buy comic books, he bought, they reported a bunch of Mussolini memorabilia.
What?
Like, I don't know why, but okay. That's like
bizarre.
a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast.
What?
Okay. So the comic books he bought just a ton of comics. Some were like not worth anything. But he did buy a number of highly collectible ones.
Huh.
One being All-Star Comics #3 from 1940.
Oh, wow.
And you may have seen this one, but it has the Justice Society of America sitting around a table. And it's all the heroes from the Justice Society, which was like a precursor to the Justice League.
Oh.
And the Justice Society is considered the first true like superhero team.
Like the first Avengers.
Yeah. So when this comic book went up for sale in 2012 by an auction house called Heritage, which is one of the biggest auction houses for comic books, it got a lot of attention because the comic seemed to sell for way more than it should have.
Huh.
It was valued around $70,000 on the high end, but the comic book ended up selling for a record-breaking $200,000.
What?
So, and at this auction, there were also other comic books that were considered mid-tier comic books. And as far as value, they were kind of, not super high, but definitely worth stuff. And they were just going for crazy amounts in this auction. And people were like, what is going on?
Like this is crazy.
These same comics had been for sale previously, like the same titles, and they didn't get this much money. But whoever's bidding on them didn't seem to know much about comic book values. They were just throwing out huge numbers.
Huh.
So anyway, people were flabbergasted, and people started to think, well, whoever's buying this collection in this auction must just have a lot of money to burn.
Yeah.
So I wonder who that could have been. Could it have been Anthony?
Tony Baloney?
Tony. So right after the crane company, Tadano, began their investigation on the suspicious transactions, he didn't show up for work the next day. And
Tony.
He went on the run for about 6 months.
Oh, God.
He then randomly turned himself in to police in Rhode Island. Now, remember, he had worked in Texas, so he showed up in Rhode Island. And it's not like he had run out of money, because when he was arrested, he had like a suitcase with like $100,000 in it. So
that's weird.
He must have felt things were closing in on him. And so
also, whenever you have money in a suitcase, it's never a good sign.
Yeah. So, but that's not even the craziest part of this story.
Oh my God.
So while Anthony was on the run, the crane company had hired a private investigator to figure out the extent of the embezzlement. And it led them to a storage facility in Texas. And it was a climate-controlled storage facility.
You're like, as a comic book historian.
Thank God. And a former museum worker. I'm thankful for that. But they also found wire transfers from Anthony to Heritage Auctions. So they knew it was him that had bought these comic books. Now, the Harris County District Attorney investigator, his name is Dustin Deutsch. And I hope I'm saying that right, or Deutsch. But he was a specialist in forensic evidence, and he even taught like college courses on forensics. He was in charge of cataloging all the stolen items and comic books. And he had put them all in boxes and recorded them. And in the storage unit was that $200,000 issue of All Star Comics had been purchased. For some reason, that comic book, along with some other of the higher end comics, never made it onto the evidence list.
What? All these weird guys are like comic book heads. This is
So about 3 months, we're kind of going back to when Anthony was still on the run. There was this other guy named Lonnie Blevins, and he went to the Wizard World Comic Book Convention in Chicago, which that actually used to be like one of my favorite comic book conventions to attend.
Oh my God, how fun.
Yeah. So maybe he was there and this was happening while I was there. I don't know.
I was going to say, where were you during this whole thing?
So he goes and he brings a box of comics to try to sell at this convention. And that's really typical at there's comic book dealers, there's dealers buying, there's just random people buying stuff. And the man who purchased the All-Star Comics #3 was a little suspicious how this random guy had just gotten all these really pristine comics, including that All-Star Comics, especially because here's another thing. These really high-priced comics get put in a plastic case. And in the comic book industry, it's called slabbing.
Ooh.
So these comics are slabbed, and it's basically like a plastic prison for comic books. And you can't read them, you can't take them out, but they do have a serial number and other identifying information once they're put in that plastic.
Right.
And the one that Heritage Auctions had sold had been in one of those cases. So anyway, this guy is like, he bought the comic, but, and this is like tens of thousands of dollars he's buying this comic for. He bought it, and 2 other people bought comics that Lonnie Blevins was selling that weekend. Eventually, the person who bought the All-Star Comics 3 realized it had the same blemishes and inconsistencies like on the covers and on the pages as the one that had sold in the auction for $200,000.
Oh my God, I think I know where this is going.
And it was the same comic. So who was Lonnie Blevins? Was he just a comic book fan?
Oh no.
Nope. He was another investigator from the Harris County DA's office. And he had been working with the forensic investigator, Dustin Deutsch.
I knew it.
They had stolen the evidence from the embezzlement case, and then they sold it.
This is one of like the dorkiest cases of dirty cops I've like ever.
I know, right? And they had gone so far as to break open the plastic slabbing because they thought, I guess, in their brains that it would disguise the comic.
Oh my God.
So eventually, Lonnie Blevins and Dustin Deutsch were sentenced to 10 and 5 years, respectively.
Jesus Christ.
So I don't know who is worse in this story. The Anthony, who started it all off and committed the embezzlement, or the 2 guys who are supposed to be the good guys.
Yeah.
Who should have known better, and they resold the comics. So
I also don't understand prison sentences. Like this guy like stole the comic book and got and resold it and got 10 years. And in the previous story, that guy like murdered someone and got 20. It just I feel like prison sentences are just like really arbitrary, that they just like throw out a number.
I know, right? And the main guy, Anthony Chiofalo, he was sentenced to 40 years for the embezzlement. But
what?
I looked him up and I tried to find what he was doing now. He was released in 2019.
Oh my God.
So he only served like 7 years of his 40-year sentence.
That's insane.
Now, he was disbarred, and I found his profile on readsy.com.
Match.com.
Match.com. Yeah. And Readsy.com, it's like they do editing services for like self-publishing and that sort of thing. And he is currently advertising his services as a translator for Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, German, and Dutch.
Oh my God, we got to get him to translate this episode into Italian.
Yes. Who knows if he has the same sense of humor as Nick Cage.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. His bio also says he's an aspiring author and an attorney. It goes through his legal bona fides, but most importantly, it lists in his bios that he studied the true meaning of life at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice from 2012 to 2019.
Meaning prison?
Yes.
That's honestly a really smart way to put prison in your resume.
Yes.
That's genius.
Yes. So here's to hoping he studied hard and learned his lesson.
Oh my God, that's so funny. If you have any gaps in your resume, you should put like study the true meaning of life at my house or like homeschool the true meaning of life. Like that's smart.
Yes.
I like that. I actually like that about him.
So in conclusion, I think the moral of the story is don't steal.
Yes.
Don't steal comic books.
Yes.
It's a small community of collectors and you most likely will get caught.
Yeah.
So
it's such a specific community and all those serial numbers, like, come on.
Exactly. And you know, there are staples that are, you know, rusted just the perfect way. There's pages that have foxing and mold and just the right folds on the pages that really give these things away. So
yeah, people know, don't do it.
Don't do it. But yeah, so that is my story.
Jackie, that was so amazing. And also, like, I love when people bring their personal lives and make an episode of it. Like, the previous 2 episodes were about people's, like, hometowns. And I love that this was about, like, comic books and you're a comic book historian. Like, it's so inspiring. And Melissa and I need to do more of that, like, keep it close to home. It's really, really cool. If people want to, like, get in touch with you or read your stuff or listen to your podcast or anything like that, where can you be reached?
Yeah. So my website is sequentialcrush.com.
Okay.
Like
perfect.
Sequential art.
Got it. Okay.
And my podcast is also called Sequential Crush.
Love it.
So just look that up. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Jackie, and that's spelled JACQUENODELL.
Amazing. Jackie, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll have to have you come on again and just like talk about comic book history for us.
Absolutely.
I think it's so cool. Well, guys, if you guys have any cool comic book stories, if you're comic book collectors or anything like that, please email or call in. We're kind of stalled on mailbag episodes while Melissa's away, but we will have them in a few months from now. So while your message won't be timely, it will still be important. All right. Well, this is Jackie and Allie, and we are signing off. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
An Erios original.
Powered by Acast.